All right, people, we got a full jam-packed panel for today's stream. Chris is back from the dead because he came back on because he couldn't resist the chance for another Marvel movie, although his opinions may be a little bit different on this one than we originally thought. We got Matt from Basic Entertainment. We have Joe of Guy at the Movies here. We are here to talk about the, surprisingly enough, I feel like critically maligned Thor Love and Thunder, although I'm hoping to at least get a little bit of a change in the usual, modus operandi of the usual critics and Twitter-fueled circles and all that. You guys got anything to say before we get this thing started?
Dude, I'm just ready to get into it, man. I mean, Matt's literally shooting on a 35 millimeter lens, which is more thought than anything that was put into this. No, I'm just kidding. Let's chat about it and get into this thing.
All of that and more on today's episode of the Talking TV podcast. All right, people, we're back. It's Sunday morning at 11 a.m. We've got another Marvel movie to talk about, so therefore, naturally, we had to get a full-on, jam-packed panel. Guys, this was a little bit interesting because even though, obviously, the MCU obviously officially came back last year, this year I feel it was going to be a little bit more of the more anticipated properties, considering that these movies that were all coming out were all returning characters we were familiar with. Doctor Strange, Thor, Black Panther. They were all following up movies that for the most part were pretty critically beloved and critically well received. Obviously did very well at the box office. Thor Ragnarok has often been hailed as one of, if not the best MCU movie. I still personally don't agree with that, but we'll get into that in a later point. So I wanted to start off the conversation with this, which is that I feel like going into this year, so much of the focus was on Multiverse of Madness, just on the Marvel front, that Thor almost felt like an afterthought, literally to the point where the trailer literally only came out a month and a half before the movie even came out. Like, it was not that much time between the trailer and the movie itself. So I just wanted to go around the round panel here in order to kind of kick off their discussion. What kind of was everyone's thought process going into this movie, Thor Love and Thunder, especially considering that it's like, it was kind of already in a weird spot considering that Thor had already had the traditional 3 movies, but Ragnarok didn't feel like the traditionalist wrap up, at least not that we thought at the time. So I wanted to get your guys' thoughts. What was your anticipation going into this movie? Whoever wants to start, they can go.
Yeah, I'll let our guest go first on this one.
I'll kick it off. Not a huge fan of Ragnarok. And I know this one was going to be the 2.0. And I wasn't a huge fan of this one.
Okay. All right. Interesting. Good to know. I'll get
Short
your
but
thoughts on that
sweet.
later. No, but I like that because Matt's got some similar thoughts as me. Joe, what was your anticipation going into this?
So everything that Matt just said, the opposite. I love Thor Ragnarok. It's my favorite MCU movie. So I was expecting to just have a good time with this. That's what I was really looking for. I love Taika Waititi as a director. I think he does a great job with, balancing drama with humor and just really finding a unique way to tell stories. So I was looking forward to something that wasn't as serious as what we got with Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, and just having fun again with an MCU movie and not having to sit there and connect all the pieces and think and put the puzzle together. Just treat me like a dumb movie goer. And that's what I got.
That's fair, especially considering that I feel like that's what Marvel does to the majority of its audiences. Chris, your thoughts going into this?
Yeah, I think, in light of recent events, health has become more important to me than ever before. And so I'm just trying to not raise the blood pressure too much. So I've just really learned how to enjoy these films for what they are. Once I left the theater for Jurassic World, after watching my childhood second favorite franchise behind Star Wars be butchered in real time, and I realized that life goes on, right? The beat goes on, as my old high school football coach used to say whenever we'd lose, which was every Saturday. I've learned to roll with the punches, if you will. And so with that said, I'm not really up in arms, but I still don't think it was a great movie. Although it's strange because the Thor little, I guess not trilogy anymore, the Thor mini franchise within the MCU is my favorite aspect of the MCU. I love when we go cosmic and celestial. I think that's the coolest stuff. Of course, Thor: The Dark World is my favorite Marvel film, still undefeated, unscathed. Only with Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1 creeping up slowly behind it every time I rewatch that, which is honestly more than you guys might think. But I will say this, all in all, I don't watch trailers, so I'm really glad I don't watch trailers, except for when Dom like says I have to, which I do because he knows what's up. But so this one I didn't get like a trailer bomb, and I didn't feel the need to watch the trailer, so my Guardians of the Galaxy experience wasn't spoiled. We can get into how that was. I'm still not the biggest fan of it, but all in all, to answer the Taika question, love him as a creator. I really don't like him as a director, but I walked out of this one. I had a good time. So I think this podcast for me is like one of those classic, I'm going to figure out how I feel along the way. Cause I'm so like the scales are so balanced, the good and the bad. I'm just waiting for one of you guys to pull me in either direction.
It's like, well, what is it? The thing from Moon Knight, right? Where it's literally the scales have to be perfectly balanced out. You're not sure whether they're going to tip one way. Yeah, my thought process going into this, Taika Waititi, I think, has been a very, not polarizing director. I got into him because of What We Do in the Shadows, which I thought was an absolute masterpiece. And so naturally, I was super excited when I found out that he was going to be directing Marvel movies just because his style just felt so off kilter and fresh at the time. That was a time when I like to kind of state is like the rise of the film brats. A lot of like, kind of a new generation of filmmakers that were really coming out and had this really like fresh palette and batch of ideas, and a few of those guys obviously went on. Ryan Coogler was I also included in that batch as well. A couple of those guys went on to direct Marvel movies, and I came out of Ragnarok being like, that was good, but I feel like I should have enjoyed that a lot more than I actually did, because the constant thing that I'm back and forth on all the time with Ragnarok is I feel like, unlike what Guardians of the Galaxy did so well, I feel like Ragnarok, every time a joke came in, it was distracting from the drama, which for the most part, the dramatic moments I thought were really, really well. And it also became really apparent after a certain point that Taika was really only interested in one section of that movie. He was clearly all into the car segments, which were the best segments of the movie. And then when it came to the Asgard stuff, the ending fight was pretty cool, but the opening bits were kind of meh. It felt like he was just kind of trying to take shots at a franchise that, while certainly not perfect in the MCU, I felt like I'm like, really? Like, this isn't adding anything, And then I was keeping track, obviously, of his career post-Ragnarok, and that's really when it took off for him. He won an Oscar for Jojo Rabbit. He executive produced and got off the ground 2 incredible shows, aside from the What We Do in the TV spinoff of What We Do in the Shadows, Reservation Dogs, and now just recently Our Flag Means Death on HBO Max. Currently, his Star Wars movie is still set to go. He directed a comedic soccer movie that was supposed to come out in the last couple of years and it kept getting delayed because of the pandemic. So Taika's all over the place. He's working on constantly like 15 different things at once. And so naturally going into Love and Thunder, my thought process was, it's like, well, is he going to be able to maintain that kind of consistent creative flair? Considering that, unlike when he did Ragnarok, his talents are literally being spread all over the place. He's got like a hand in this, a hand in that. I'm surprised he hasn't tried directing like some other like stage play like Tarantino has. At one point, he was going to do the Akira remake, live action remake, which Chris, I know how special that is to your heart. So I wouldn't want that touched either, because I just can only imagine how good that movie is. So you can imagine my surprise of coming out of Love and Thunder. Not only did I enjoy it more than Ragnarok, which I think is like a controversial statement for a lot of people, the people who both liked Love and Thunder and disliked Love and Thunder, because I think at the end of the day, the consensus is that they still enjoy Ragnarok better. I'll get into that in a little bit, but I think even more surprising than that is how I feel like in an age where it feels like the creativity is slowly being stripped more and more away from the Marvel properties, and that's already to say a lot, because there was already complaints for years about how the Marvel movies didn't feel like they exemplified the creators' best strengths. I feel like that's even more apparent now than it was previously. I feel like the most creative instance of a Marvel movie that we've gotten recently is what Sam Raimi was able to do in Multiverse of Madness. But the biggest surprise is it's like, wow, okay, this felt even more like a Taika Waititi movie than a Marvel movie than Ragnarok did, even so much. And that's kind of where I want to lead into the conversation as far as what this movie is about. So obviously this movie takes place shortly after the events of Endgame, as a lot of the other Phase 4 projects are. Thor's with the Guardians of the Galaxy. They're going around having these bunch of crazy space missions. It opens up with like just a montage of like different nutso stuff that they're up to. It's up to the usual batch. Taika Waititi's friends with James Gunn, so it's no surprise that, the Guardians were going to get like at least a little insert in here before they obviously, have their swan song next year with the 3rd volume that Gunn has obviously come back to do after Marvel fired him the first time. But the biggest thing here is that Thor really doesn't know where he's at right now. He's still trying to figure stuff out. He obviously had that big moment in Endgame where he sits down with his mom at the flashback after he lost so badly to Thanos at the end of Infinity War. And his mom kind of told him, it's like, yeah, you don't have to put the burden of the world on you, which is kind of crazy, because I feel like that's exactly what Ragnarok was trying to get across. But now Thor's in a little bit of a weird spot. He's not quite sure what he wants to do. And so naturally, what you can imagine his distress when, he receives an alarming call that there's that new Asgard on Earth is being attacked by a new by a new enemy called Gorr the God Butcher, obviously, who's wielding a weapon called the Necrosword that he's been using to kill apparently a bunch of different gods across the universe. He's obviously played by Christian Bale, but Thor's even more surprised when not only does he have to face this new enemy, but also that his ex-flame, who he hasn't seen in several years since, ironically, the events of, Chris, your favorite Marvel movie, Thor the Dark World, Jane Foster, portrayed by Natalie Portman, is back and wielding Mjolnir as the Mighty Thor, but with a slight twist. She unfortunately has cancer. And so that obviously, you know, they're pulling aspirations from the Mighty Thor storyline, from the Gorr the God Butcher storyline. From the comics, I don't remember what exactly that was called. They're definitely adapting a lot more of the modern day comics. So my next question for you guys across the panel is, coming out of the movie, what are your guys' general thoughts on Thor: Love and Thunder? Joe, we'll start with you, and then we'll just go in the roundtable fashion. That'll probably
so I know, in like looking back now and seeing how people are commenting and not really loving Thor: Love and Thunder, it is a real, I think, divisive MCU movie. I just remember, I saw it a couple weeks ago, and I had a smile on my face the entire time. I had a lot of fun, and that's what I wanted from this movie. So my expectations weren't high. I've learned with Marvel, you know, especially with Doctor Strange, not to have my expectations go crazy, because there's only so much you can do in a 2-hour movie. I really enjoyed this movie. I thought it was a lot of fun. I thought it was levity that's much needed in the MCU. But I also really enjoyed how they took the characters on a journey and a developmental journey. I mean, Thor he starts off the movie not really knowing kind of what his future is in terms of like what his purpose is, I should say. And by the end of it, he's kind of refocused, and you know, they tap into different aspects of his character, which I really, his character meaning his character himself, like the personal character, which I really enjoyed. I thought they did Jane Foster justice. I think they did really well with Natalie Portman. I really like how they incorporated her in and really stuck true to a lot, or at least the general, you know, storyline from the comics. And then I thought Christian Bale did a really solid job as a tortured villain, who is motivated for revenge by, you know, pain in his past, and pain in, you know, that his family, you know, with his family and all that. I thought he harnessed that really well, and he was pretty vicious. So when you look at the actual story and you look at, you know, where it ends up, and the involvement of kids in the story, and, you know, the focus on family and the focus on relationships and stuff, I think it all really played into it really well. Or really, I guess, played into the overall product really well. Was it too much in terms of humor? Maybe. But I had a lot of fun with it. You know, the joke I keep telling everyone is when Thor goes and finds Lady Sif, and she has her arm off, or her arm's gone, and he says something like, or she says like, "I want to go to Valhalla," and he goes, "Well, you got to die on the battlefield. Your arm might be there though." I thought that was like one of the funniest jokes, and I imagine them like riffing behind the scenes, like coming up with different things to say. And when you see actors having fun on screen, you can't help but have fun. And I think that's what was obvious in this, that they all buy into what Taika Waititi's doing. They had fun. They advanced the story. And again, it wasn't this huge, like, oh my God, the MCU's changing forever based on this one movie. It was more of a contained story in a lot of ways. You know, who knows what is going to go on after the after credit scene and the implications of Zeus and the gods and such like that. But I really enjoyed this movie. Again, Ragnarok is, to me, the better movie. But this was just pure joy. When those goats, the screaming goats, hit that planet or whatever and scream, I thought I was going to get annoyed. I almost pissed myself. That was the funniest thing in the world, just hearing them scream when they hit that planet. And, you know, at the end of the day, that's what I look for in a movie. Just give me a good time.
Oh, Matt, so you famously are not a fan of this movie. Give us some of your general thoughts coming out.
Famously, man.
Yeah,
famously, yeah.
Gotta follow only because you gotta follow that up.
Well, within the last couple of days, yeah, man. It's weird because I do feel like this movie is in some parts better than Thor Ragnarok. Because I found there was a couple of times where I saw myself not just chuckle, but actually laugh. I love the whole bit with the Mjolnir and Stormbreaker, and yeah, they dragged it out, but it was pretty funny. Korg opening scene with just kind of like talking about Thor's past. Someone, that was pretty cool. So I actually found myself liking the jokes here. But as a movie, I just feel like it's one part. These characters are going slingshotting from one place to another. And yeah, there's a journey there, but I feel like none of these characters kind of progress like Korg, like Tessa Thompson's Valkyrie. And I was kind of thinking, is like, this is a new trilogy. This is like kind of like that middle road trilogy where Taika came in from the last movie, started his new trilogy, and now he's going to follow up with the fifth one. Personally, I don't want to see no more Thor. I think Thor is one of the weaker characters in the MCU, in my personal opinions of how I see him. I'm a huge fan of boring Thor, Shakespearean Thor. I know that's a hot take. It's weird because we got a fan who's a fan of the first movie, a fan of the second movie. That's like the most surprising. And you got fans of Ragnarok and Love and Thunder. So it is weird. These movies are starting to become more subjective than ever. And I like that. I kind of like it how they're not trying to please everyone. This movie is not going to please everyone, but it does please an audience. So I do like that you guys got some enjoyment out of it.
Matt, I love that you're the only other person here that actually loves the first Thor as much as I do, because that to me is still Apex Thor. Like, they've never topped it in that sense.
Yeah.
But Chris, your general thoughts coming out of Love and Thunder. I know you hinted at it before, but we got a nice little like smorgasbord of like very opposite end opinions of it. I'm really liking where this is going.
Yeah, it's fun.
It's good. That's what you want. But first, I do want to say, because if you're making me follow the famous opinion of Matt from Basic Entertainment, I can't. I gotta throw it to the chat real quick, because that's a tall order, Dom. I mean, come on, dude. I thought we were friends, and you're just throwing me right after the famous opinion of Matt from Basic Entertainment.
Best way to get going, just get thrown to the wolves. Just like Homelander did when he was teaching his son his superpowers. Just chuck him off the roof. It's the best way.
Yeah, so barring Rue5 isn't either Joe or Matt or Dom's Smurf account in the chat. What's up, man? Thanks for joining us this morning. We appreciate you being here. Of course, guys, I'll take a moment to say subscribe, like, follow, turn the bell on the Talking TV podcast channel, and of course, follow our guests. Matt is on Instagram and YouTube at Basic Entertainment, and Joe has a website that's amazing called guyatthemovies.com. Of course, he's on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, and all the other places. So please go follow them. Links will be in the description. And Brian, what's up, man? It's been a while, at least for me. He said he saw the movie. It's bottom tier MCU. Not a bad movie, but not a good movie either. Better than Eternals by a long shot. I would agree. And he said his 9-year-old nephew didn't like it, and he's easily amused. Well, I'll follow that one up. It's a little easier than the famous opinion of Matt's. So with that said, I think like my general impressions, right? It kind of seems that's what we're doing here. I thought it was fun. I also, Joe, enjoyed the screaming goats quite a bit. I think it was silly and stupid and zany, and I do like Taika's. I shouldn't say I like Taika's comedy, because I'm not a big Jojo Rabbit fan. I think when Taika's comedy works for me, it's phenomenal. But when it doesn't work for me, it's very off-putting. So far, I think the 4 Thor movies have been handled really well. I mean, those are movies that I actually can rewatch, not just for like homework when I need to refresh myself on major plot points in the MCU. If I'm just like tired after a day of work and I don't want to consume something new, there's a few MCU properties I might put on if I'm in a superhero kind of mood. That's Guardians of the Galaxy, the first 2 Iron Mans, and the Thor movies. And those are just easy to watch, to go back to and have a good time and discover something new each time. And I will add this film to that list, but mostly because of the fact that I love the character so much. I do kind of think he's been doing the same thing over and over again now for a little while. He gets depressed, he finds his way back. He gets depressed, he finds his way back. We're seeing it through different lenses. So of course in, what was it, Infinity War, where he goes back to the events of the Dark World and he watches his mother die, and so then he kind of like,
but yeah.
Endgame, gotcha. One of the big 2, right? And so we've seen that, and now we've seen him rekindle his love with his old flame, Jane Foster. But of course, her sacrifice is inevitable, and because he doesn't have the strength in the moment, so she comes in, saves the day, and it is the the face turn for the villain. So it leads to her sacrifice was not in vain, and he's found love now in a child, and we'll see where that goes. I don't have problems with any of that. I think the thing is, the MCU, first of all, they're doing fine. I think this was the 5th highest opening weekend. Like, it's almost like an exercise in futility at this point. Just talking about the things as a fan of cinema that frustrate me or that I feel are becoming played out, because audiences I don't think are reacting the same way that I am. And maybe that's just like because not everyone finds their love of movies by like working on student films and they're really critiquing and learning the art form. Like it's totally okay just to go to a theater and watch it, and that's the extent of your film love. But you guys know this. I'm just growing a little tired of every moment being undercut by humor. And this movie I think is a crying shame because Chris Hemsworth has really developed as a comedic talent. I think in the first Thor, it was there, but they've really figured out a way to make someone who I don't think is a true comedian, in the sense like I don't think you would cast him in like a new comedy surge. Maybe now you would because of what he's been able to do with Thor movies, but I think initially, right, like his portfolio, his profile doesn't scream comedy. It screams like more action star, but they're really working him into this sort of hybrid actor, action hero, comedian like Chris Pratt really well. And so I think it's confusing in that regard. I just think all in all, a fun movie. It was fine. I don't think it pushed anything forward in regards to the MCU. I still think Phase 4 is a bit lackluster. And it's strange. We're back to the original problems now, where the villain really doesn't matter that much, even if it is the legendary and obviously iconic superhero actor Christian Bale. I mean, of course, we all know. And so it's a little bit of a shame when he's giving such a great performance, but it feels like he's in the same movie. And I hate that I'm like sort of pulling that from like the big headlines, but I mean, they just because they published it first doesn't mean I also thought it, you know. It's just the tone difference here was a little bit jarring, but it's nothing we haven't seen before. It's just that Phase 3 got so big, and every movie kind of felt like a team up, even outside of the Avengers films, that now we're sort of like in a soft restart where we're getting these like solo origin stories again, so we can see that Phase 1, Phase 2 villain problem back on full display. It's kind of like it's all come full circle, but it doesn't matter. This is the 5th highest opening right now of any Marvel film. 140 million, I believe, is the highest estimation. The lowest is like 128. I saw. Joe would probably know better than me, but they're doing fine.
So I'm actually looking at that right now, and it's a couple $1,000,000. It's really changing the rankings of the film. It actually now is the 12th biggest MCU opening, which is crazy. But it's based on, again, we're just talking about like a couple million here and there. It's still a huge opening. It's the highest ever opening for Natalie Portman and Taika Waititi. Which is wild. And this is a really cool statistic. Only the 3rd time in history that 2 different films topped $100 million in consecutive weekends.
Really?
So that was Jurassic World and Thor?
Minions last
Minions.
weekend.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, the one that we all kind of just relatively skip because we're like,
That's
yeah,
a
sorry,
wild
done with that.
statistic, though.
It's crazy though how much people love those stupid minions. Yeah. So my general thoughts coming out of it, I was surprised to say the least at how much I enjoyed this movie. Do I think it's still an amazing movie? No. I think as far as just the Marvel movies so far this year, I've enjoyed Multiverse of Madness significantly more, just because I feel like with Multiverse of Madness was just felt a lot more surprising as far as what I thought I was going to get versus what I actually ended up getting, and it actually was able to, again, I hate to bring back that term, but subvert my expectations, I thought, in a fairly like decent manner. And this movie, what I will say is that while it didn't necessarily surprise me in the sense of it didn't really provide any major plot points that really pushed the massive story of the MCU forward, I was okay with that. You know, I feel like I enjoyed this in the same way that I enjoyed Moon Knight in a similar way, where Moon Knight, even though, again, it is kind of an origin story, it does kind of have like, you know, the whatever, you know, the Phase 1 villain problem. I liked that it was self-contained. I liked that it didn't really connect to any of the other aspects of the MCU. You know, obviously the Guardians of the Galaxy are in this movie, but they don't really end up playing that much of a part, unfortunately, which I think kind of sucks because, once again, it's another setup from a previous MCU movie that has no payoff, but I'm kind of used to that at this point. We've been dealing with that for years. But the biggest thing for me that was the most surprising was just kind of, for lack of a better word, how genuine feeling it felt. And I know that sounds kind of antithetical considering these are Marvel movies that we're talking about, but I think the biggest surprise is the fact that like this movie really the villain plot and stopping the bad guy was like the last thought process on anybody's mind here, where unlike Ragnarok, where again it felt like it's like, okay, you feel Thor's tension, like he has to get back to Asgard, he has to protect his home, he has to stop this maniac from doing whatever it is she's going to do, because hella he literally just saw her destroy Mjolnir. But then every time they throw in a joke, it's like, oh my god, it's like how many stupid jokes are we going to make here? Like, let's go, we have a plot here. I don't know, it just didn't feel as important and prescient, you know, mostly because it just felt like I think they set up much better in the beginning how this was not really a stop the villain kind of a movie. I mean, it also helped that I think unlike Hela, who I don't think who I think kind of fell into a little bit of the generic MCU trap of, oh, I'm just a villain who wants to destroy everything. And she's got like some sort of a personal connection, but not really, you know? I think that they did an awesome job with setting up Bale as far as like his own kind of personal tragic story. You know, I thought it was really, really awesome how they kind of like were playing around with these ideas of like, what we view from our deities versus like when we actually meet them and how little they actually care about us and are mostly just like kind of these vain, self-absorbing. Again, really great commentary on celebrity culture right there. I just had to say that was like one of the first things that I noticed like immediately is that I'm like, wow, they're actually providing like a lot of different commentary here, which I was not expecting at all. Like the freaking screaming goats. I'm like, wow, I was not expecting them to bring back that meme. Like how long has it been since that original meme? Like 10 years, 11 years, something like that, since that meme was a thing. I thought that was pretty great in general. And yeah, the biggest thing that was surprising me was that the humor wasn't distracting because they made it like the center focus and they used it. Like Taika actually, I think, did learn from his previous mistakes where because he was allowed obviously a lot more creative freedom here than I could tell he was on Ragnarok. Because I also know that he was another guy that was hired after the fact, after they fired the guy who did Dark World for Ragnarok when they were kind of starting to shift things up a bit. I definitely think that he was able to have a lot more fun here. He was able to flex a little bit more. You know, I've heard obviously the stories of the 4-hour-long cut. God, I hope we never get that because that just sounds exhausting, even though I'm sure it would be fun. But you can just imagine that's because of just how much outtakes they had from how much they were riffing and how much they were improvising, where it's like, I don't know what it is. Just like every bit of humor just worked for me. And I will say that Thor, in his journey throughout the MCU in the 11 years that he's been playing the character, which is still baffling to me that it's a bit that he's been playing the character for 11 years, because 2011 is a year that is still very, very vivid and fresh in my mind. Just the amount of change that he's undergone. I think Thor, of all of the Marvel characters, I think has undergone the most change in the last, decade of Marvel activity. And it's weird because most of the time you would think that would be a bad thing, but for me at least, I know it works. Again, like I said, there are people who enjoy kind of the old school, very stiff, regal Shakespearean Thor. There are people who obviously enjoy the goofier Thor. I think the instances when Thor is utilized the best is when they're able to kind of merge those. That's why I still think that Infinity War is the best usage of Thor, even if I don't necessarily know if that's his best performance. But Chris, to comment off your point about Hemsworth itself, I think the biggest thing as to why Hemsworth is so fully realized in this movie is because I feel like with this movie, they solved with Hemsworth what they had been trying to solve for the last second, which is for the last second, it felt like Hollywood didn't really know how to use Hemsworth outside of Thor. You would see him pop up in all these different random movies. Obviously, he's in Cabin in the Woods, which was shot long before it was supposed to originally come out. He pops up in Rush, which is an Oscar bait movie. He stars in a Michael Mann movie, Black Hat, which is an absolute disaster. Then they start trying to put him in all these comedies that don't really work. He's in the Vacation movie. He's in the Ghostbusters 2016 movie. He's in all those. And so throughout all of this, I feel like the biggest thing is they never really knew how to utilize Thor, because I feel like Hemsworth how they never felt like they knew how to utilize Hemsworth, because I feel like they never really knew what Hemsworth was actually capable of, because when he was cast as Thor, he'd been in so few things. But now I feel like Hemsworth has really hit his stride as far as like being, for lack of a better word, like the modern day incarnation of Brad Pitt, where he's funny, he's charming, he's literally a 10 as far as like on the beauty scale goes, but he also does have a charming personality. He knows how to riff, he knows how to have fun. And as far as like, obviously the thing that people always talked about with Brad Pitt was that Brad Pitt was a character actor trapped in a leading man's body. And I feel like that's the case with Hemsworth as well. But I feel like unlike that, Hemsworth has found a way to like really utilize and mix like kind of his character actor traits with his leading man status. And I think that this is the most fully realized version of that. And I think that's why it works so well. And I think that's why his arc throughout this movie, I think, works so well. And as far as Natalie Portman goes, I mean, consider the fact that Natalie Portman famously said that she would like never come back to another Marvel movie after the Dark World. Chris, I know you're a fan of that movie, but there are a lot of people who are not. A lot of the people who are on that movie included, so much so that they literally had to reuse footage of her from the Dark World for Endgame, that she was not on set at all for the filming of that movie. So naturally, I was surprised when they announced at Comic-Con, what was it, 2019 or 2020, whenever it was that they first announced that Natalie Portman was going to be coming back. And I'm like, whoa, they must have really had to do a really strong pitch for her to come back. And honestly, as far as I'm concerned, they redeemed her. Like, Jane Foster has come a long way since she first popped up in that first Thor movie, and I was blown away. Like, she was arguably, like, I think at times even more compelling than Thor was in this movie, you know? And I thought that their chemistry, their back and forth was really compelling. I thought their journey together was really awesome. And it actually kind of made her final sacrifice at the end, like, really tragic when that happened in a way that, and it really made me feel feelings that I was just not expecting at all, you know? Her material was, like, I think a little campy. I think a little bit of the riffing improv. I think she wasn't necessarily as strong with that as Hemsworth was, mostly because, again, this was her first instance of working with Waititi. But I don't know. As for my money and everything that I saw her in, I thought that she crushed it. And for me, she's the MVP of the movie. And we haven't even gotten to talk about, like, the middle segment yet, like the Olympian God segment of that, which I wanted to get your guys' take on all that as well.
We gotta talk a little bit about Natalie Portman though first.
Yeah.
So what I will say is I'm all one for like comedic freedom, you know, but I also do not enjoy cancer jokes. So I didn't really enjoy that too much about this movie. I think it's a little insensitive, but I do think they can say it if they want to say it. It's just not something I'd put in my script. So I didn't really appreciate that too much. I know that has nothing to do with Natalie Portman, but I think that's like the side of Taika that just doesn't really resonate with me too much. And so that's just something where I felt like her character was like kind of like a joke when it was like a serious thing, and I just think her performance felt a little like I felt like she was trying to walk a fine line. She didn't feel comfortable to me in this film. Like I feel like she never settled into the role, is what I'm saying. And I just think it feels like the Harrison Ford thing where she came back just to die, because even though this is a franchise that's very popular, and in her case, she was long famous before this, but with Harrison Ford, Star Wars kind of elevated him to that new level of stardom that he had never seen prior. So he came back just to die, even though it was the thing that was so beholden to him. He just didn't want anything else to do with it, didn't even want his agent being bothered for an exorbitant amount of money in the future. Just kill me off and let me go. I kind of feel like that's part of why she came back. Like that might be why it's so easy to get her back, because she is an actress who I think and is, in my opinion, but I do think she also considers herself very high caliber, super artistic actress who is obviously capable to take on parts and roles that many other of her peers can't. Like she's just got chops unlike any other. She's like a generational talent is what I'm trying to say. And so I do think like this little payday that might have been the first Thor movies might have stained her artistic resume a little too much. And so I think coming back to die isn't as hard of a pitch in my mind as you might have made it just seem. At least that's what I think. If you're getting paid to come back to be done with something that you wish you never did, it's kind of like the best way to go out, in my opinion. But I don't know, like the whole thing about this movie is I feel like for an hour and 50 minutes, I was entertained. I was laughing. It was fun. But I feel like we never really settled into any specific journey. Like, yeah, okay, we're rescuing the kids, but that's also kind of on the back burner. And yeah, okay, we're like watching this relationship be rekindled, but that's also kind of like, how far can that go? Because we know she has a terminal illness. And yeah, okay, there's this villain trying to like kill everyone with the God sword, but then like Thor goes and kills Zeus. So like, all right, I just feel like we never really locked into a path. So as amazing as she was, and as much as I do love the Jane Foster character, I just felt like it fell flat, you know?
Interesting. That's an interesting take. What are your guys' thoughts on that, Matt and Joe? I want to hear your guys' thoughts before I comment on that.
We're talking about the pitch of the movie. I think the pitch of the movie was just having Taika directing this movie. I'm pretty sure she probably heard some stuff about Ragnarok and saw like Chris Hemsworth like, hey, I was having fun on the set. Come for the next one. And it seems like that. It does seem like Joe was saying, it seems like they were having fun. Russell Crowe was
ridiculous
something in this movie. He was absolutely,
to say the
something.
least.
And it is fun to see those actors just have fun. They're not there just for the paycheck. And I think that's what it was. But also too, with her passing in this movie, I kind of felt like it fit into the narrative and the movie it was trying to do. It wasn't trying to, and this is kind of the thing about talking about, I know I'm getting off rails, but it's kind of the thing about Phase 4. I like the whole directionless of it. We don't need to set up anything. I don't want to see another, this movie leads into that movie leads into that. I kind of like these contained stories. Let us Thor mini universe be a Thor mini universe. That's how I feel. But Natalie Portman, I was just kind of like looking at her and it's like, wow, she looks great as Thor. And boom, you see when she gets rid of the hammer, you just see a totally different actress. But not even that. I was kind of more like, are those muscles real? Because I was like, there's no way. It's hard to get muscle when how old is she? Like 40. She looks great, but man, that I was like, that has to be CGI something. With these MCU movies, you can never know what's real or not. So Yeah, I think she looked good. I think she was good. I think she was probably the best usage of the new actors in here, which is and slightly kind of disappointing because we had Christian Bale, which is Christian Bale, but I thought she was. I think she was the best part of the movie in my opinion.
Interesting. Joe, what's your take on that?
Yeah, so Chris, I have a different take on kind of what you were saying. Matt, I completely agree with everything you said. Matt, I agree with you. Chris, you suck. No, I think one of the things that they did with Natalie Portman's character is, and her storyline of having cancer is giving her ownership over the cancer and giving her, the power to make the joke, right? To own what's happening to her and to find her way, one, in dealing with her diagnosis, but two, in trying to overcome issues of the past, whether that's the relationship or things that she hasn't done and things like that. So that's kind of how I viewed this. I thought she did a really good job of, owning the situation that her character is put in, and playing it really well. I mean, she's a very talented actress. Obviously, she's awarded and all. I really liked what they did with that, and I think that Taika has a way of taking. This is a divisive comment. Because he's a divisive person. He has a way of taking serious topics and presenting them in a way that maybe takes the oomph out of them a little bit, or out of the topic, and boils it down a little bit, but still is telling the story, I think, in a respectful way. And that's a lot of the discourse about Jojo Rabbit and all of that. I totally get that. I thought here they gave her a lot to do. It wasn't just an afterthought. It wasn't just a second, subplot here. I thought that she really drove a lot of what happened in the movie, and without her, we wouldn't have gotten the journey that Chris Hemsworth Thor goes on in terms of this character development. I thought some of the scenes between him and her, especially the hospital near the end, was just really genuine and really emotional and good. But yeah, I really enjoy that she came back. I think back in the day she had said like she wasn't saying she would never come back. But I think that she just wanted to see something worthwhile with the character. And I think that's what she was given here, a worthwhile storyline where she wasn't just the love interest. But the first scene where she throws Mjolnir and it splits off and does all that stuff, I was like, go for it. Like, yeah, like screaming, loving it. Because she owned it and she looked badass. And I think that they not only redeemed the character, but gave her a proper send off. If this is her last movie, I mean, there's other things that they can do with, number one, it's a comic book movie. So like who's dead is never dead. But she's in Valhalla and she could lead like the new Valkyrie, which was a storyline in the comics. She could end up, maybe she's going to be part of like when Chris Hemsworth finally is done. And if they kill him off, maybe we're going to see, Anthony Hopkins and Idris Elba and Natalie Portman up there welcoming him to Valhalla and stuff. So I think I don't think we've seen the last of her, but I just loved everything they did with her here.
Yeah, and to kind of comment off of your thoughts as well, Chris, I think that's interesting considering that I feel like obviously we talk all the time about how, in today's day and age, how comedians are constantly at risk as far as watching what they're able to say and the types of subject matters that they're able to cover. And I think the most surprising thing for me is how Taika is able to handle kind of all the different stuff and not make it tacky, if that makes any sense. I feel like a lesser person would kind of tackle a lot of the subject matters that he does and would really come off as like kind of tacky and not nearly as intelligent as he is. And I think the thing is that like Taika's really good at, again, just making things that would normally have a lot of oomph, as Joe would say, just kind of not take the air out of it, but kind of like just make it more brevity and like kind of relatable, where he does take the idea of it's like, yeah, she is dying from cancer. And the way that I think about it is like, yeah, at the very least, she gets to have this one last badass adventure before she unfortunately does succumb to this illness. And that's kind of what was getting me through it personally. I thought that was probably what made her arc so compelling in this movie is the fact that, yeah, she realized, she's tried everything. She's been going through all this. She's with Darcy in the beginning. She's trying to make light of the situation people do when they're in that. And obviously it's in a Marvel way, so it's not going to feel probably as genuine as it should. But that really kind of got to me where it's like, oh man, like she kind of got a raw deal here, where it's like, again, I also thought this movie did a spectacular job of filling in the gaps of all the years that happened between the Dark World, Age of Ultron, and Ragnarok. Because that was a thing that people criticized. It's like, wait, this was like quintessential part of Thor's life. He literally left Asgard for her, and you're just gonna write her off as like a one-off line, in Ragnarok. And obviously, we talk about how Jane and Loki were like kind of the two essential aspects of Thor. Now obviously, Loki obviously said goodbye, and even though he's technically still alive, he's off in an alternate aspect. But Thor doesn't have that. But so now he's got Jane back, and now he loses that too. I think it all kind of works in tandem with what they're trying to go for. And again, the idea that Jane is kind of on her last legs here, ultimately, I think that it kind of, in a strange way, like they handle it the best way that they can. And even though the jokes themselves, certain of the moments where it's like she kind of just comes out of nowhere and is like, oh yeah, I have cancer. And Thor's just like, wait, what? And it literally just comes out of nowhere. Like, sure, like specific moments like that, I think could have been handled better. That's kind of where it felt more like a sketch show to me than part of a movie. But I think kind of as far as what they're trying to go for, I think they handled it for the most part really, really well.
But Dom, can I just jump in there real quick?
Oh, sure.
Like that, so that part especially, like I think that's an example of them handling that well. Like if you, and thankfully I don't have an illness right now that is terminal. But just having family members that have been through cancer and stuff like that, there is a question of how do you tell people? How do you bring that up? What's the right time? So her just kind of blurting it out there, I was like, that totally happens. And it also shows the human aspect of her just being like, well, yeah, but I have cancer, and I enjoyed that. I think that goes back to like ownership of the individual over their diagnosis and trying to control what they can control. But maybe that's a little too deep for a Taika Waititi Marvel movie.
Yeah. Who knows?
Yeah, no, I just think Joe, you raised a good point. You actually kind of changed my initial opinion on that. So, well said, I have to say. I still think that it's just weird joking in a movie. I've never gotten over, and I should at this point. I'm my own worst enemy. I just need to accept these are the times we live in where a great dramatic or action set piece moment will be undercut with a little comedy, like you might not be in Valhalla, but your arm might be. I don't know. I think I'm as much as I'm trying to enjoy it, I just haven't gotten over it. But I do think it's still not a joke I would make as a writer. But hey, I also wasn't like deeply offended by it. I just thought it kind of felt like it would have been stronger for her as a character and more compelling for me as an audience member if it was portrayed a little more straight. I just thought the emotion was there between them, but I feel like I wanted more out of it, because I think what I'm learning from this conversation is, and it kind of seems like Matt and I are on the same page, like what's the direction of this movie? Like there were so many different threads that I thought could all be so interesting. And I'm one that's loved all three of the Thor movies so far, Dark World above all the rest, but I still have enjoyed this Thor journey we've been on over the last 11 years with Hemsworth. But at least in all those films with their flaws, there was at least a sense of direction, right? Like the origin story that speaks for itself. Dark World, we're getting this Shakespearean power of the gods, sort of Game of Thrones homage-ish type of drama, MCU-ified, of course, but that's what they were playing into. And then Ragnarok is just like, galactic chaos, just going on a crazy mission, like Thor just running rampant and doing whatever, and obviously the Hulk is just hilarious in that film, and it's just like a planet smashing sort of adventure, but there's like a theme there, you can follow it. There's like that epic third act where I believe that's the movie where and correct me if I'm wrong, but Asgard comes under attack and we lose Heimdall, and all that stuff goes down, and it was just so epic and huge, and we built up to something. And I felt like what we built up to would have been acceptable in 2008 if this movie had ran adjacent to the original Iron Man, and it was like Thor's origin, and now the rest of his journey is going to be him trying to avenge his lost love, and we've seen him become Thor and take up the mantle. It just felt a little weird for a character we've had all this experience with. We literally saw help take down Thanos, and now we're kind of back to square one, which, hey, that makes sense for like a Shang-Chi, for a Black Widow who's getting her first movie, who's always kind of been in the back corner, unfortunately. But it doesn't, I don't know. I feel like Thor should have amounted to more. And even if it didn't, where are we going? I just wanted a roadmap because, it's a 3-act structure and we don't need to, this isn't film school, but you guys know what I'm trying to say. But I think that's what I'm realizing from this conversation, really.
There could have been more scenes. There could have been more scenes, especially with Christian Bale, Gorr the God Butcher. I mean, Gorr the God Butcher, and he doesn't really butcher any gods, which I thought was really disappointing.
And that's the big thing too. Also, is obviously we know there were a lot of, besides obviously the rumor of the 4-hour cut, which God, the internet, please do not make that a thing. I'm sick to death of that. But
well, Taika said he hates director's cuts.
Taika
so
said
you're
he
lucky.
does hate director's cuts, which I'm like, thank God. So hopefully that puts the kibosh on that. But yeah, there were famously a lot of deleted scenes. There were supposed to be scenes that showed Gorr killing both Jeff Goldblum's the Grandmaster and Peter Dinklage's E-Tree. There was also apparently supposed to be a scene with Lena Headey that apparently she's being sued for now by Disney. They haven't released any of the details of that. But yeah, it definitely kind of is disappointing where it's like, okay, Gorr the God Butcher, he's supposed to be killing all these gods, and he seems more concerned with kidnapping Asgardian kids rather than like killing all the gods, who are conveniently all in this one giant like structure that's just been hanging in the middle of space this entire time, and we've just never known. And then we go in there and we get like these random brief snapshots of like all these different gods of like some Egyptian gods. And I'm like, oh, okay, so that's like a brief thing of like how Moon Knight connects to it and all. It just reeks of the fact that it's like the MCU is trying so desperately to keep it makes no sense because they're trying so desperately. It's like, it feels like they're trying to like just shoot as much stuff as possible and then just edit them together and then just put them out as a movie. I feel like that's definitely becoming more of a thing. It's really strange because say what you will about Eternals, but at the very least, Eternals felt like a cohesive movie where even as awesome as No Way Home was, even No Way Home still felt like just a hodgepodge of like they're just shooting as much stuff as they can and then just editing it together in order to try and resemble something resembling a film. I got that sense from No Way Home, from Doctor Strange, Multiverse of Madness, and I definitely get that sense from here where, again, it feels like they're just, the story, quote unquote, is on the back burner as far as like, I say the story, I mean the actual plot is very much on the back burner where, again, the plot of this movie is they're just slingshotting around from location to location to location until they inevitably just come across the bad guy and are forced to stop him, and then there's a twist there. But so the kind of the rapid fire pace, that's probably my biggest problem with it, where, again, similar to Multiverse of Madness, it's just going by so fast that you just don't really have a chance to process anything and really like kind of enjoy some of those really juicy emotional moments, which there are. But again, they're speeding past them so fast that it's like, can we really enjoy them as much as we want to? Where it's like, again, the Russell Crowe and Zeus sequence, it's awesome, but it's kind of at the end of the day just results as like a cheap laugh, and then it results in a post-credit scene, which, Chris, I mean, I'm assuming you must have been pumped with that post-credit scene when you saw who was cast as playing Hercules, our boy Roy Kent from Ted Lasso. I thought that was really cool. But again,
dude, he's here, he's there.
He is. He is everywhere.
He's everywhere lately, man.
Oh man, it's awesome. I just thought that was so cool. That had been a rumor where I'm like, wait, really? Is that gonna happen? I mean,
so dumb.
The look, but
I'm sorry. I loved what you were saying. Can I just interject real quick?
Oh, sure.
Just give me some sort of direction. I felt like we had so many different ways. They were all compelling. That's my biggest problem with this movie, right? The love connection, the terminal illness, rekindling with an old flame. There was clearly love there. If you just give me that as the A story, like give me an A story and then everything else was a B story, amazing. We could have played into the whole celestial thing, right? Like the gods
right. Celestials are there for like a brief snapshot and then they're just like, what? They don't do anything? Like
the most interesting thing I've seen in the MCU since like Infinity War happened in this movie where Zeus said, we will make them fear us again. We could have played into that. That sounds so freaking cool. You need a new big bad for the next phase? Zeus. He goes crazy. I mean, he's literally the ultimate god of Greek mythology. Or we could have even played with, Christian Bale's character and seen it from his eyes. And we could have played with him like taking down god after god. And so Thor as like a god has to stand up. Like I so desperately wanted to sink my teeth into something. And I just feel like I couldn't. But that's why I'm so frustrated with this film, because I still loved it because I'm biased and I love Thor. And there was a lot of good stuff. I just didn't get enough of anything. I don't know how I'm going to score this thing.
I think this movie more than Multiverse of Madness needed those more. It needed those extra longing scenes. It needed more scenes. Even with Multiverse of Madness, it still felt to me coherent. This one was like, I see a good coherent movie in here, and there's some brilliant elements, but I think Taika just kind of gets in his own way a little bit.
Right.
or
Well,
just the runtime of it.
Yeah, well, but this kind of brings me to my last point that I wanted to cover briefly before we do get out of here, because we are unfortunately running short on time, which is the last point that I have here is we talked about Thor's history in the MCU. We talked about Taika Waititi in general, this style, which is that the last point that I have, though, is this as bad as the reviews are saying? Because, I mean, I think, again, we've got, like, a pretty, like, we're running the wide gamut here. You know, Matt, I feel like you're more so on, like, you know, the lot not liking this train. Joe, you obviously are a big fan of this movie. I feel like Chris and I are, like, kind of sort of in the middle. I'm, like, slightly closer to Joe. Chris is slightly closer to Matt. So we got, like, a nice even vibe, like, kind of running the four quadrants here. But the most surprising thing that I saw coming out of this movie is that people were saying that this was straight up bad. Like, there were a lot of people that were not saying this is good. I saw one person even dare to claim that this is like, oh, this is like the Marvel's version of Batman and Robin, which I'm like, okay, that's going a little bit too far there. That's a little bit too over the top there. But I don't know, like, well, why do you guys think that this is not striking as hard of a chord with audiences as Ragnarok was? You know, that's kind of like what I wanted to get your guys' take on before we wrapped up and got out of here. I have my own personal thoughts on it, but I wanted to hear your guys' thoughts first on that.
I think we're at a weird time with the MCU where and I think Chris was talking about this a little bit earlier, they really built up the brand of Marvel cinematic films through Endgame, and we've been conditioned to expect more and more and more impactful, more important to the overarching story. What we're getting with Phase 4 in general is less of that. It's introductions of new characters. It's taking a step back from the world is ending. Every film, the world is ending. It's taking a step back from that, and I think Thor: Love and Thunder is probably the biggest example of taking a step back, where it just is. The story is, you know, the binding piece of this story is that Gorr takes the kids, and they need to find the kids, and it's all about how they're going to get to them. But there's so much else packed into this. I think what we're starting to see from casual moviegoers, and then people like us who are going to the movies all the time and looking at it with a critical eye, is that it's so different from what the MCU has done before, where we don't have a cohesive idea of where things are going. And I think they're starting to realize that. Feige has said, you know, we're going to understand it soon. And they have a big mega panel. It's Comic-Con coming up, and then they have D23 Expo. So I think we're going to get a lot of clarity there of where things are going. But we're kind of in phase 1 again, in a way, where they're just introducing new people, new concepts. There's a lot of stuff going on that doesn't necessarily right now look like it's building to anything. And I think that without that cohesiveness, without that plan, and without people being able to see where it's going, people are tired. There's a little bit of a fatigue, I think, definitely. That's going to happen when you're 25, 26, 27 movies in. But I think that's where I think people are just wanting to. We've been taught that it's a commitment in the MCU. You know, everything is building towards something. But now we have series after series after series on Disney Plus that you do need to watch. I don't care that they say, like, you know, don't watch this because they're not going to, you know, fold into the larger whatever. You can skip them and still know what's going on. I don't believe that. I think down the road you're going to need to see it. Prime example is Miss Marvel is leading into the Marvels. I just think there's a lot going on. I think there is a little bit of fatigue, and I think that when people walk out of a movie, and similar to like what Chris was saying, where, you know, Thor: Love and Thunder is a movie that just is. It's kind of its own contained thing. I think people are like, okay, fine, but like, what the hell is going on with the rest of the MCU? So I don't know. I think we're just in a weird time with Marvel, and maybe things will change in a couple of months, but I think there's just a lot of fatigue going on.
Interesting. Matt, what's kind of your take on that?
Yeah, there's definitely some fatigue, and I gotta echo Joe's point. I just think MCU fans, I don't know how can I separate them from a group, because I don't want to sound like an asshole, but I think they're kind of spoiled. I think we got a movie that's lead into that, to this and that and this and that. I don't want that. I want a Thor franchise, Hercules. That's it. Maybe it doesn't go anywhere. That's how it kind of is in the comic books, because I think Kevin Feige has built a comic book universe, and now you can pick what you want. Yep. He's trying to make it more accessible, and movies like Thor: Love and Thunder is accessible for turn off your brain. Let's go, big box of popcorn, soda, have a good time. want something like Moon Knight or something like that, it's very disconnected, then you go ahead and enjoy it with the MCU kind of formula and the pink, pixel dust Disney stuff in it. So yeah, that's why I think I like this kind of directionless stuff. I think people are just taught one way, and you try to make them do some different type of math, and now it's like, oh, the world is burning. I think everything's gonna come in full circle. I just hope Feige doesn't get pressured into something that he needs to backtrack because of the audience.
And the reason I don't think he's going to get pressured into that or backtrack is because they're still making their money. Every film, it's just such a weird, Marvel is such a weird entity that people will bitch and moan about it nonstop, but then still go
watch it.
Still buy the product, you know?
Right. Exactly.
So it's happening. I completely agree with that.
I feel like you make the argument about like any one of the big three properties right now. Obviously, Star Wars and DC are included in that as well. Jurassic Park to some extent, where the overall quality of it aside, people are gonna have their thoughts, but they're still gonna go watch and they're still gonna make money. Again, the value is in the IP right now, and those 4 IPs are still more valuable than anything else. Chris, what's your take on that before we wrap it up and get out of here?
No, I mean, well said, gentlemen. I think I totally agree with everything you guys just said. I think it's a scenario where it seems to be, and I think this is common knowledge at this point, the loudest voices on the internet, and especially in our film community, are the ones that sometimes are in the smallest group. And it seems like, even though I'm not necessarily a fan of everything Marvel's doing, the money speaks loudest, right? Like why would they abandon the formula if this is potentially, and I know it's only a matter of a few million bucks, we'll see what the next hours bring in. This could be a top 5 release. If anything, out of 27 movies, it's upper echelon. It's made more money than most on an opening weekend out of the MCU and most other films in this day and age. Already it's done more than most other films. I just think it's one of those things where I'm along for the ride because I just find it so interesting at this point. Will the formula shoot them in the foot? Did they dig themselves a hole? Are they trying to do new and different things with like an Eternals, with like a Thor Ragnarok? And are we seeing the backlash now because they've trained their audience so much so, like when, every time Dwight hears the bell, he reaches out for that tic tac, and then the one time it's not there, he's like, "What's going on? Where's my tic tac? You rang the bell, Jim." I feel like it's that kind of scenario right now that's happening. Except the the MCU is trying to break away from what Dwight's under, that spell. They're trying to like, oh shit, we trained these people, and now it's like hurting our brand because like we're restarting and we can rebrand ourselves here with a new god, we might not even need a new overarching mainstream villain that connects all the movies. We don't know what they have planned. We're just speculating. So I think I'm along for the ride, really just for like science, the purpose of being like someone who enjoys art and pushing it to the limit. Like, will this work? Can they separate from the formula? Are they trying to separate from the formula, or is this all just hyperbole? I don't know. All I know is that it's interesting times for the MCU. That is for sure.
Chris, real quick, I just do want to clarify when you mentioned earlier the 5th largest opening or whatever. I think you're actually right with that. I was looking at domestic. So domestically, it's the 12th biggest MCU, but it made a killing overseas as well. So I'm not sure.
Okay, so total, it's 5th, but domestically not as strong as maybe other top 5.
Right,
Cool.
Especially since I'm pretty sure that Marvel movies in general, I mean, you would have to do more research, but I'm pretty sure Marvel movies in general are not opening in China anymore, which I know has a obviously was a big contributor to obviously the box office, the worldwide box office in recent years. Again, you guys might have to do a little bit more research on that. My kind of take on that whole thing is I think if we're just talking specifically about the movie, the difference between Ragnarok and Love and Thunder, I think what we got here is a Guardians versus Guardians of the Galaxy 2 situation, which is where the first issues of these directors coming in, it's very much like kind of they're still playing ball with the studio. The studio is very much working with them in order to kind of, portray their creative talent in a very mainstream way. And so when the movies are released, people are going to, for the most part, they're going to enjoy them all around. But then the second effort, the creators come in, they're given a lot more creative freedom to really do what they want here. And that's going to be make or break for a lot of people, where the people who like that are going to really love that. But the people who are not going to be the biggest fan of it, because Guardians of the Galaxy 2, I know is still hit or miss for a lot of people. For me, it's top 5 MCU, but I know for a lot of people, it's not the case. Same thing I feel like is going to be the case with Love and Thunder, although it may be less so on the palette, because I feel like just when it comes to like, and that's going to come down to like individual filmmaker taste overall. But with that being said, thank you guys so much. This is an absolute blast having all of you guys on. Again, it is always just an absolute joy to have each and every single one of you guys on, even though obviously we're not able to come together in the same kind of community that we did. So we're going to do a little bit of a merging of what we usually do in a wrap up. We're going to go around the round table. We're going to give our final thoughts, final star ratings, then do the usual plugs where the people can find you. Joe, where can the good people find you? Starting with you.
You can find me at guyatthemovies.com, and all the social links are linked there. So yeah, lots of fun stuff there.
Awesome. And then final thoughts and star ratings on the movie.
I really enjoyed myself. There's some critical things I could probably get into, but I ultimately gave this a 5 out of 5 in terms of enjoyment.
Wow, it's crazy. Matt, where can the good people follow you? Final thoughts and star ratings on the movie.
You guys can follow me at Basic Entertainment. We're talking all the pop culture stuff. And Basic Entertainment on TikTok and Instagram. And my final thoughts on the movie is a Ragnarok on steroids. I like that. Taika is doing Taika. I appreciate that. And for me, 2 stars.
Interesting. Chris, where can the good people follow you with everything you got going on and your final thoughts and star ratings?
Yeah, so you guys can follow me at Christian Evanko. Evanko spelled Evanko. I make podcasts. I make music, which you can find on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, YouTube, the whole 9. So anywhere you can find the Talkin' TV podcast, you can find my music. I'd greatly appreciate it, and I hope to see you across all socials. But before I leave you, my final star rating on Thor: Love and Thunder, I'm going to go with a 3.5. That might raise, that might lower. Check my Letterboxd if you want to see where I land in a few days, because this will be one that I have to get down there and fully put my thoughts to print on. But yeah, enjoyment score, I'll go with Joe on that, because I think this is a movie that deserves the enjoyment score above all else. 3.5. What about you, Dom?
100%. So, of course, you guys can follow me across all platforms at Movie Nerd Reviews, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Letterboxd, Serialized, TikTok, all the above. My final thoughts and star ratings for Thor: Love and Thunder was a movie that I was kind of apprehensive going into. I think the trailers kind of won me over as time went on, and then coming out of it, like all of you guys said, I just had so much fun with this movie. Like I said, I'm just so tired of having to do homework for movies. Movies are a thing that I'm supposed to enjoy, not school. They're not supposed to be school. They're not supposed to be things that I'm supposed to do research and do these theses and TED Talks and projects on. I just want to go in and have a fun time occasionally. That's exactly what I did with this movie. Sure, were there problems? Absolutely. I still have a few problems with the pacing and with the actual focus of what the plot was, what I was sold versus what it actually was. But all that being said, I still enjoy Taika. I still enjoy everything that he does. I think that everybody here was just having an absolute blast. So for me, it's a 4 out of 5 stars easily. Before we get out of here, be sure to follow the official Talkin' TV podcast across all social media platforms: Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Twitter. And be sure to subscribe on YouTube if you're watching us there. Be sure to follow us on Twitch if you're listening to us there. And as always, people, for myself, Chris, Joe, and Matt, 12 seasons in a short film. And watch more fucking movies. We'll see you guys next time.
Stranger Things next week. Brace yourselves.
Yes. Oh, it's going to be good.
Yeah.